Alright, so, imagine this. Every book ever written. Every map ever drawn. Every medical discovery, every math formula, every star chart, every philosophy, every science experiment, every piece of human knowledge that existed on this planet, all of it sitting in one single building. Now imagine that building burns down, and most of it is just gone. Forever. That is not a movie plot. That is not some made-up story somebody told around a fire. That is one of the most real and most painful things that ever happened in human history. And the crazy part is, we still do not fully know who did it. We still do not know exactly when. And we still do not know everything that was lost inside those walls that we are talking about, the Library of Alexandria. The greatest collection of human knowledge the ancient world ever put together. A place so important that losing it literally set humanity back hundreds of years. Maybe more, and today we are going to tell the whole story. From the very beginning to the very end. Who built it? What was inside it? Who destroyed it? And what we lost forever on the day it burned. Buckle up. Because this one is going to hit different. Oncoming fist. The city that started it all. Okay, so before we even talk about the library, we need to talk about the city it was built in. Because Alexandria was not just some random city. It was one of the most insane cities ever built in the history of human civilization. And the story of how it got built is wild in itself. It all starts with one man. Alexander the Great. And yeah, you have probably heard that name. But here is the thing, most people do not fully understand just how crazy this guy was. He was born in 356 BC in a small kingdom called Macedonia in northern Greece. And by the time he was 32 years old, he had conquered basically the entire known world. Egypt. Persia. Parts of India. He just kept going and going, like he literally could not stop. In 331 BC Alexander rolled into Egypt. And instead of destroying it like most conquerors would do, he did something completely different. He sat down. He looked at the land. And he said, I am going to build a city here. Right here on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. And it is going to be the greatest city the world has ever seen, and honestly, he was not wrong that he picked the location himself. Right on the Egyptian coastline where the Mediterranean Sea meets the Nile Delta. Perfect for trade. Perfect for ships. Perfect for connecting every part of the known world. He literally walked around the site himself, drawing out where the streets would go. Where the buildings would be. How the whole city would look. Then he left to go conquer more stuff, because that was just his whole thing, and he left his people behind to actually build it. Alexandria grew fast. Crazy fast. Within just a few decades it went from empty coastline to one of the most powerful cities on earth. It had a massive harbor. A giant lighthouse, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It had palaces, temples, markets, and people from every corner of the world walking its streets every single day. Greek people. Egyptian people. Jewish people. Persian people. Roman people. All living together. All trading. All sharing ideas. All bringing their knowledge and their culture into one place, and that right there, that mixing of cultures and ideas, is exactly what made the library possible, because when you put that many smart people from that many different backgrounds into one city, knowledge does not just sit still. It grows. It spreads. It builds on itself. And somebody eventually decides to collect all of it in one place. That somebody came pretty soon after Alexander. And the story of how they built the greatest library in history starts with a dynasty that most people have never even heard of. Alexandria was not just a city. It was an idea. And that idea was about to change everything. The man who actually built it. So here is the thing, Alexander the Great gets a lot of the credit for Alexandria. And yeah, he picked the spot and had the vision. But he never actually saw the library. He died in 323 BC at just 32 years old before any of it really came together. Some people say he died from fever. Some say poison. Some say he just pushed his body too hard for too long. Either way, Alexander was gone. And his massive empire needed someone to run it. His generals split everything up between themselves. And the man who got Egypt was a guy named Ptolemy. Now Ptolemy was smart. Really smart. He had been one of Alexander's closest friends and one of his best generals. And when he got Egypt, he looked around and thought, okay, how do I make this the greatest kingdom in the world? And his answer was knowledge. Ptolemy I, also called Ptolemy Soter, which means Ptolemy the Savior, had this idea that was honestly ahead of its time by about 2,000 years. He believed that whoever controls knowledge controls the world. Not just armies. Not just gold. Knowledge. Information. Ideas. That is where real power comes from. So around 283 BC he started building something called the Mouse Ion. Now that word might sound familiar because it is actually where we get the modern word museum from. The Mouse Ion was basically a giant research institution. A place where the smartest people in the world could come and live and think and write and discover things, and right at the heart of the Mouse Ion was the library. His son Ptolemy II carried on the work. And then his son after that. The whole Ptolemaic dynasty, which ruled Egypt for about 300 years, poured money and energy and obsession into making this library the greatest collection of knowledge on the planet, and they were serious about it. Dead serious. They had a rule for every ship that came into the harbor of Alexandria. Every single ship. If you were carrying books or scrolls on your ship, they took them. They brought them to the library, copied them out by hand, and then gave you back the copy. They kept the original. Yeah. They literally seized books from ships. That is how badly they wanted everything. They sent people all over the world to buy scrolls. They hired scholars to translate books from every language into Greek. They collected works from Egypt, Persia, Babylon, India, Ethiopia, everywhere. If it was written down somewhere in the ancient world, there was a very good chance a copy of it ended up in Alexandria. At its peak, the Library of Alexandria is estimated to have held somewhere between 400,000 and 700,000 scrolls. Let that sink in. In a world where every single word had to be written by hand, where there were no printing presses, no copy machines, no computers, this place had up to 700,000 individual scrolls packed inside it. It was not just a library. It was the brain of the entire ancient world. And the man who started it all was a general who understood something that most kings never figure out: swords win battles. But knowledge wins history. Light bulb. What was actually inside those walls? Alright, so now let's talk about what was actually in there. Because this is the part that honestly keeps historians up at night. Because we know some of what was inside. But most of it we will never know. And that is the part that hurts. What we do know is that the library had works from basically every field of human knowledge that existed at the time. And we are not talking about basic stuff. We are talking about some of the most advanced thinking any human being has ever done. Let's start with science. The library held the works of Eratosthenes, a Greek mathematician and geographer who calculated the circumference of the Earth around 240 BC. Yeah. 2,200 years ago this man figured out how big the Earth was. And he was incredibly close to the right answer. He was working with sticks and shadows and pure mathematics, and he basically nailed it. His work was in the library. Then there was Aristarchus of Samos. This guy, and pay close attention here because this is wild, this guy figured out that the Earth goes around the Sun. Not the other way around. In 270 BC. Over 1,700 years before Copernicus gets credit for the same idea. His work was in the library. And when the library burned, his original writings went with it. The world forgot his idea and had to rediscover it almost 2 millennia later. Real talk, that is one of the most painful things in this entire story. There was Euclid, the father of geometry. His works were there. Archimedes, possibly the greatest mathematician and engineer of the ancient world, his writings were there. Hero of Alexandria, who basically invented the first steam engine as a toy and wrote about it, his works were there. Then there was medicine. The library held the works of Herophilus, a doctor who performed some of the first recorded dissections of the human body and figured out that the brain controls the nervous system. Not the heart. The brain. In 300 BC. That knowledge was sitting in Alexandria. There were works on astronomy. Works on philosophy. Works from Aristotle, one of the greatest thinkers who ever lived. Plato. Socrates. Sophocles. Euripides. There were plays and poems and histories and geographies and military strategies and agricultural guides and medical textbooks and mathematical proofs. There were works written in Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, Aramaic, Persian, Ethiopian, Latin and more. Books that had been translated from languages that no longer even exist today. Original texts. First editions. Things written by the actual people who discovered or created the ideas inside them, and here is something that most people do not think about. A lot of what we know today about ancient history, we know it because someone in Alexandria made a copy of something before the original was lost somewhere else. The library was not just collecting knowledge. It was preserving it. Saving it from the natural decay of time. So when people ask what was lost when the library burned, the honest answer is we do not fully know. Because some of what burned we never even knew existed. Imagine discoveries that were made 2,000 years ago that could have changed medicine or science or engineering, just gone. Sitting in a scroll that turned to ash before anyone could copy it down again. That is not just sad. That is one of the greatest tragedies in human history. Pensive face. The scholars who lived there. So the library was not just a storage room for scrolls. It was a living, breathing place full of some of the smartest people who ever walked this earth. And the way it worked was genuinely incredible for its time. The Ptolemaic kings did not just collect books. They collected people. The best minds from every corner of the ancient world were invited to come to Alexandria. And not just invited, paid. Housed. Federal. Given everything they needed to just think and research and write without worrying about anything else. Imagine that. A place where the government basically says, you are smart. Come here. We will give you a place to live, food to eat, and all the books you could ever want. Just think. Just learn. Just create. The scholars who lived and worked at the Library of Alexandria read like a who's who of ancient genius. There was Eratosthenes, who we already talked about, the guy who measured the earth. But here is something even cooler about him. He was also the chief librarian of Alexandria for decades. He ran the whole place. And while running it he also found time to create one of the first maps of the world, invent a system for finding prime numbers called the sieve of Eratosthenes that mathematicians still use today, and write about geography in a way that shaped how humans understood the world for centuries. Then there was Hypatia. And look, Hypatia deserves her own video honestly. She was a mathematician, astronomer and philosopher who taught at Alexandria around 400 AD. She was brilliant. She wrote commentaries on mathematics and astronomy that were used for centuries. She was one of the few women in the ancient world who was widely respected as an intellectual giant, and she was murdered for it. But we will get to that later. There was Apollonius of Rhodes who wrote epic poetry there. There was Xenocrates who was the very first head librarian and spent his life organizing and cataloging all the scrolls, which by itself was an insane job. There was Callimachus who created one of the first ever library catalog systems, basically inventing the idea of organizing books so people could actually find them. These were not just academics sitting in dusty rooms. These were people pushing the boundaries of what humans understood about the universe. About the body. About mathematics. About the stars. About language and literature and philosophy, and they were all in one place. Talking to each other. Arguing with each other. Building on each other's ideas. That is something really special that people do not appreciate enough about Alexandria. It was not just a library. It was a community. The world's first real research university. Basically, when these people got together, magic happened. Real intellectual magic. The kind that moves human civilization forward by centuries in just a few decades, and then slowly, that community started to fall apart. Books. The first blow, Julius Caesar. Alright, so here is where the story gets complicated. Because here is the thing, the Library of Alexandria did not die in one night. It did not burn down in one big dramatic fire, and that was that. The truth is messier than that. The truth involves multiple people, multiple events, spread out over hundreds of years, and the first really big blow came from someone you definitely know. Julius Caesar. So it is 48 BC. Caesar has just arrived in Egypt chasing his rival Pompey. He ends up getting wrapped up in the Egyptian royal drama, specifically the power struggle between the young pharaoh Ptolemy XIII and his sister Cleopatra. Yeah, that Cleopatra. And Caesar, being Caesar, picks a side. He picks Cleopatra, and suddenly he is in the middle of a war inside Alexandria itself. Now during this fighting, Caesar ordered his ships in the harbor to be set on fire to prevent them from being captured by his enemies. And here is where things get messy. The fire from those ships spread. It jumped from the harbor to the docks. And from the docks, according to some ancient sources, it spread to a warehouse near the waterfront that was being used to store scrolls. Now some historians say this was a smaller secondary library or a storage area for scrolls waiting to be processed. Some say it was part of the main library. The debate is still going on today. But what is pretty clear is that Caesar's fire destroyed a significant number of scrolls. Ancient sources mention numbers ranging from 40,000 to 70,000 scrolls burned in that fire. 40,000 to 70,000 scrolls. Gone in one night because of a military decision made without thinking about what was stored nearby. And here is the wild part. Caesar himself wrote about his time in Alexandria in detail. But he never directly mentioned burning any library or scrolls. He just talked about burning the ships. Either he genuinely did not know what the fire spread to, or he did not want to talk about it. Either way, the first major wound to the Library of Alexandria came from one of the most famous men in history. And he probably did not even fully realize what he had done, but the library survived. Damaged. Hurting. But still standing, and the worst was still to come. Crossed swords. The slow decline. So here is something that most people get wrong about the Library of Alexandria. They picture this one dramatic night where everything burns and the library is just gone. But that is not really what happened. The truth is the library died slowly. Over centuries. Like a patient that keeps getting hurt over and over again until eventually there is nothing left to save. After Caesar, the library kept going. The Ptolemaic dynasty eventually ended and Egypt became a Roman province. But the Romans, especially in the early years, actually respected Alexandria and its library. Some Roman emperors even added to the collection. Augustus. Claudius. They understood the value of what was there, but Rome itself was changing. The empire was getting bigger and harder to manage. Political instability was creeping in. Emperors were being assassinated left and right. Civil wars kept breaking out. And as Rome got more chaotic, its ability and willingness to protect and fund places like the Library of Alexandria got weaker and weaker. Around 270 AD, a queen named Zenobia from the city of Palmyra in modern-day Syria decided to rebel against Rome and conquer Egypt. She took Alexandria. And in the fighting that followed, a Roman emperor named Aurelian came to take it back. The battle was brutal. A large section of Alexandria called the Brucheion, which was the royal quarter where the main library was located, was pretty much destroyed in the fighting. How much of the library survived that we do not know exactly. But it could not have been good. Then came Emperor Diocletian in 297 AD. Another rebellion. Another siege of Alexandria. More destruction. More burning. More loss, and through all of this the library was getting smaller. Weaker. Less funded. Less protected. The great scholars were still there, but there were fewer of them. The scrolls were still there, but there were fewer of those too, and then came the religious wars. And that is where things got really dark. Pensive face. The Christian destruction and Hypatia. Okay, so look, this part of the story is sensitive. And the goal here is not to bash any religion or any group of people. History is complicated and people do complicated things for complicated reasons. But the truth is the truth and we are going to tell it straight up. By the late 300s AD the Roman Empire had officially become Christian. Emperor Theodosius made Christianity the official state religion and started banning pagan practices. And in Alexandria, which was still a very mixed city with pagans, Christians, and Jewish people all living together, this created serious tension. In 391 AD a Christian bishop named Theophilus ordered the destruction of pagan temples in Alexandria. And one of the targets was the Serapeum, a massive temple dedicated to the god Serapis that also housed what many historians believe was a secondary collection of the library. A daughter library basically. Filled with thousands of scrolls, the Serapeum was attacked by a Christian mob. The temple was destroyed. And the scrolls inside, nobody knows exactly how many, were burned or scattered or lost. This was a massive blow. Maybe the biggest one yet. And then came Hypatia. Remember her, the brilliant female mathematician and philosopher we talked about earlier. She was still teaching in Alexandria around 415 AD. She was a pagan. She was brilliant. And she was friends with the Roman governor of Alexandria, which made her a political target for the new Christian leadership of the city. A Christian mob, led or encouraged by a man named Peter the Reader, dragged Hypatia from her carriage in the street. They took her to a church. And they killed her. They tore her apart. It is one of the most horrifying moments in this entire story. Hypatia was not just a person. She represented the old Alexandria. The Alexandria of free inquiry, open debate, the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. And when she died, something died with her. Many scholars who had been at Alexandria fled the city after that. The intellectual community that had made the library great for centuries basically dissolved. The people who knew how to use the knowledge, protect it, and add to it, were gone. A library without scholars is just a building full of paper. And buildings do not last forever. The Arab Conquest and the final blow. Alright, so we are now in 641 AD. More than 900 years after the library was first built. Egypt has fallen to the Arab Muslim armies led by a general named Amr ibn al-As under the Caliph Omar. And this is where the most famous and most debated story about the library comes from. According to a story that was written down several hundred years after it supposedly happened, Amr ibn al-As asked the Caliph Omar what to do with the books in Alexandria. And Omar supposedly said something like this: if the books agree with the Quran they are unnecessary. If they disagree they are dangerous. Either way burn them. And according to this story the scrolls were used to heat the bathhouses of Alexandria for 6 months. 6 months of burning. Every single day. Now here is the thing. Most modern historians are actually pretty skeptical about this story. The account was written centuries after it supposedly happened. There is no contemporary evidence of it. And by 641 AD, after Caesar's fire, after the Battle of Aurelian, after Diocletian, after Theophilus and the Serapeum, after centuries of neglect and decline, most historians believe there was probably not much left of the library to burn anyway. So was this story true? Maybe partly. Maybe not at all. The honest answer is we do not know for certain, but here is what we do know. By the time the Arab armies arrived in Alexandria, the Great Library, the one that had held 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls at its peak, was already a shadow of what it had once been. Whatever remained was finished off by this point. Whether by Arab fire or simple neglect or a combination of everything, the Library of Alexandria was gone. After nearly 1,000 years of being the brain of the ancient world, it was just gone. Fire. What we lost forever. Okay, so now we get to the part that honestly hurts the most. What did we actually lose? Because this is not abstract. This is not just about old books. What was lost in Alexandria had real consequences for real human beings for centuries after. Let's start with medicine. We know that ancient Alexandrian doctors were performing incredibly sophisticated medical procedures. We know they understood anatomy in ways that would not be rediscovered in Europe until the Renaissance, over 1,000 years later. How much medical knowledge was lost? How many treatments? How many surgical techniques? How many discoveries about the human body that could have saved millions of lives over those 1,000 years of darkness that we will never know? Then there is astronomy. We know Aristarchus figured out the Earth goes around the Sun in 270 BC. But because his original detailed works were lost, the world forgot. Copernicus had to figure it out again in 1543 AD. That is 1800 years of delay. 1800 years where humanity was working with wrong information about the solar system because the right information burned in Alexandria. There is mathematics. We know ancient mathematicians were working on problems that would not be solved again until the modern era. What problems had they already cracked? What formulas? What proofs? What shortcuts and discoveries that could have accelerated human progress by centuries? There is engineering. Hero of Alexandria built a working steam-powered device in 50 AD. A simple one, but the principle was there. The steam engine. If that knowledge had survived and been built upon, could the Industrial Revolution have happened 1,000 years earlier? Could humanity have had modern technology by the year 1000 instead of the year 1800? These are not crazy questions. These are real questions that real historians and scientists think about, and then there is literature. Philosophy. History. How many plays by Sophocles are lost? How many works by Aristotle that we have never read? How many histories of civilizations that no longer exist, written by people who actually lived among them, gone forever because the scrolls they were written on turned to ash? The Library of Alexandria was not just a building. It was humanity's memory. And when it burned, we forgot things. Really important things. Things that took us centuries or millennia to remember again. That is not just a historical fact. That is a wound that the human race is still carrying. Pensive face. Why does it still matter today? So here is the thing, why are we still talking about this? It happened over 1,000 years ago. We have the internet now. We have more information available to any person with a smartphone than the entire Library of Alexandria ever held. So why does it still matter? It matters because of what it teaches us. The Library of Alexandria did not fall because of one villain. It did not burn because of one bad decision. It fell because of a combination of things: war, neglect, political change, religious conflict, funding cuts, and the slow erosion of the value that people placed on knowledge and free inquiry. And honestly, look around today. Does any of that sound familiar? Libraries are closing. Funding for education and research gets cut. Scientific knowledge gets dismissed. Books get banned. People who ask hard questions get silenced. History gets rewritten. The same forces that slowly killed Alexandria are still out there. They just look a little different today. The story of Alexandria is a warning. A real genuine warning from history about what happens when a society stops valuing knowledge. Stops protecting it. Stops funding the people who create and preserve it. And there is something else. The Library of Alexandria showed the world what is possible when you bring people together, people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different belief systems, and give them a safe space to think and share and build on each other's ideas. The explosion of knowledge that happened in Alexandria was not an accident. It was the direct result of diversity and openness and collaboration. When that openness ended, when the city became a place of conflict instead of collaboration, the library died with it. That lesson is just as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Maybe more so. Knowledge is fragile. It needs to be protected. It needs to be valued. It needs to be shared freely. The moment a society starts treating knowledge as dangerous, as something to be controlled or destroyed, that society starts moving backwards. Alexandria learned that the hard way. And the whole world paid the price. Globe showing Europe, Africa. Alright, so here is where we land. The Library of Alexandria was real. The knowledge inside it was real. The loss was real. And the impact of that loss, the centuries of delayed progress, the rediscoveries that should have never needed to happen, the questions we will never be able to answer, all of that is real too. It was not killed by one person. It was not destroyed in one night. It was worn down slowly by war and politics and religious conflict and neglect and the gradual fading of a society that had once valued knowledge above almost everything else, and somewhere in the ashes of Alexandria, in the metaphorical ashes that we are still sifting through today, there are answers to questions we are still asking. Medical cures we have not found yet. Mathematical proofs we have not cracked. Astronomical discoveries we have not made. All of it was there once. Written down. Preserved. Waiting to be read, and then it was gone. The Library of Alexandria does not just belong to ancient history. It belongs to all of us. It was humanity's greatest library. And losing it was humanity's greatest intellectual tragedy that we built it once. We lost it once. And the only way to honor what was lost is to make sure, absolutely sure, that we never let it happen again. Stay curious. Protect knowledge. And never stop asking questions, because that is exactly what Alexandria would have wanted. Oncoming fist fire.